On the front of the museum, when it was originally constructed as a church, starting about 1730 or 40, something like that, it originally had 8 windows. And later on, perhaps about 1775, they made 4 of them into 2 big tall windows, something like you would get in Thomas Telford's churches, his parliamentary churches. In fact, this might have been the prototype for that, who knows. At the west end of the church itself is exactly east-west. There is an area of slightly lighter green grass, a circular area, which is a sacred enclosure. And it's just behind me, stretching round there. It goes down, and you can see there's a large stone and 3 stones beside it. Where I'm standing, there are gravestones dating from the 20th century and the 19th century, but nobody else is buried here. Now, these people presumably thought that it was very superstitious and old-fashioned to worry about things like sacred areas, and they just got themselves buried here anyway. Nothing wrong with that, it's pole position for them. However, the rest of the population have steered clear of this since the Dark Ages. This biggest stone is the Farr stone. One of the most important parts of the Farr stone is the back of it. And in a Pictish stone, they left the surface of it originally at the very beginning quite rough, and they would make designs which ran over the surface, sometimes looking rather like tattoos actually, on an arm or something like that. Now, the monks obviously prized this stone, which came from the mouth of the River Neva, a district called Inverness, and one of the things about this type of moin schist is that it has ripples in it, beautiful ripples, something like the grain in wood, and also crystals. And the monks would have prized this, particularly Columba, who was a great artist and visionary. So this stone was chosen right at the beginning because of the natural designs on the back of it. It is carved on the other side. It does look a little bit as though it's been cracked there, but that crack is an igneous intrusion and happened millions of years ago. Beside it are 3 smaller stones which are contemporary with this main stone itself, probably slightly earlier, and these would be monks from that period, sometime in say 600 and something through into the early 8th century. One of them might have carved a stone, and the carving is quite amazing. It's a kind of a unique stone, the Farr stone, or clachfracr as it's called in Sutherland Gaelic. And it has layers and layers and layers of iconography in it. It's possible that this whole design, which is a very integrated design, was originally either an altarpiece or a garment, maybe, which the person who would have stood in front of this stone would originally have worn, and they may have just pinned it over and then pecked their way through to get the design and copy it. Part of it is Irish in design, and part of it is Pictish in design, from the Pictish period. This makes it quite a unique stone. The other thing which is totally unique to the Farr stone is that, as far as we know, no pun intended, it's in exactly the original position it was set up. Not only does the local folklore say that the monks came here, set up this stone, in the morning they had gone and the stone was left, and it's never been moved, but it's also on the same alignment as these stones. It's not on a west-east alignment like the main building, and it actually points towards the start of midwinter sunset, and also points towards Northern Ireland, the sun setting over it. Now, Columba came from Northern Ireland, so that might have something to do with it. About 40 miles or so east of here is Orkney, and on Orkney is Maes Howe, and the chamber, a great chamber tomb. The chamber points towards the midwinter sunset. It was built several thousand years, 3.5 at least, before this was ever made, and it's quite surprising to find that the monks are thinking along those lines thousands of years later. The cross part of it actually represents a brass style of cross which you find in Northern Ireland, in Ulster. And they have found from the 8th century, the 7th century, brass crosses of this type. They're not very big, they're about that size, and also the stone moulds which they were cast from. Now, down there we may find crosses like that. Archaeologists would love to have a little peek into the soil where I'm standing. The key patterns are another very intriguing feature of the stone, because this is Pictish art, and the Picts were still in charge of what is now Scotland at that time, mostly on the east side of Scotland. The Scots were actually at this particular period starting to come in the west into Argyll and so on, Columba being part of that movement. So we have the Irish bit in the middle, but it's standing on top of a Pictish key pattern which goes away down under the grass there, and another one up there. Very complicated, very symbolic of something in Pictish culture. The thing is that this particular design is also found on a stone in Wales, also dating from 7th, 8th century. And this particular design is found in the Book of Kells. Now, the Book of Kells is thought to have been masterminded by Columba, and it's quite likely that he was also the mastermind behind this very integrated design. So it may be that the whole design is spelling out a message to the people, the tattooed pagans that would have been standing around it. It has 3 swastikas on it, just like you get on Tibetan prayer mats. This is also extremely unusual. Even more perhaps alarming is there is a symbol here, and the only thing that you can find like it are in books of tattoos of Maoris in New Zealand. Now, most people would find that rather strange, but the Maoris migrate eastwards from the north through India to the Cook Islands, going through Melanesia, and then they get down to New Zealand just before we do, in actual fact. The Picts were tattooed, the Zulus, he said, I'm going wrong here, the Maoris were both tattooed. A tattoo is a book, one tattoo artist copies another, so it is possible that the two things are linked.